Masterminds have been around for a long time, right? But unless you had a bunch of extra income to throw at it, you couldn't be a part of it. Well, we wanted to solve that problem. And so we're bringing masterminds to you for free. Welcome to Mastermind for the Masses. So, how was your guys' holidays? Did you have a good Christmas? Well, I guess it's not New Year's yet. We're right in between Christmas and New Year's when we're recording this. It probably won't launch till the end of January. But how were your guys' holidays?
Yeah, it was good. Just spent some time with my brother and my mom on Christmas Eve, and then my dad and that side of the family on Christmas Day. But it was nice. I didn't have to run around too much. My both sides only live like 30 minutes apart from each other, and I'm like 30 minutes away from each of them, so worked out pretty nice. But yeah, it was fun.
It's awesome. Shan, you have a good holiday as well?
I had to run around too much, unlike Colby. I
Yeah.
probably made like 7 or 8 trips on Christmas, so
Ooh.
it was good, but I'm tired of the
Oh no.
driving back and forth. That's what
You
happens when
gotta
you have kids.
you gotta pull the parent thing of like you guys come to us now.
Yeah,
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 I
that's
remember
rough.
that. Yeah, I remember doing that when my kids were younger. Luckily now one of them drives, so they wanted to go somewhere else, and I was like, "All right, have fun. I will be here." So they headed off to um, some other family that we have a couple hours away, um, and we see them periodically. But the kids wanted to really go see them that day, so they drove over there and got to hang out, which was nice.
Nice.
But yeah, so this time of year, obviously, it always gets me thinking personally about like kind of to Shan's point, right? And yours too, Colby, with saying, "Hey, come here now." One of the things I've been thinking a lot about is time management. Like when we look at time, what makes something a good use of time, or how do you know actually balance the time that you have to make it worthwhile? I figured that'd be a great topic to get your guys' thoughts on tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Man, I feel like time is very it's very broad in scope in terms of just how many things I think need to go into how you consider it and how you manage it. And I think probably the biggest thing is just being very intentional with your time. I think there's a lot of things in life that you can devote your time to, and everyone can make their own arguments whether or not something is more valuable versus what some people consider a waste of time. But I think as long as you're intentional with it, that's like at least I think you gotta start there at the very least. At least that's my take on it, right?
Yeah, no, I think the intentionality is definitely key in the way that I handle it too. Shan, what about you, man?
I think time management has a lot to do with that question, right? Like if you're good at time management, then really time becomes valuable and important when it's either for like your own mental health reasons, your own enjoyment, being productive. Whereas if you're not so good at like time management, it can be a stressful factor to where suddenly like time is insanely valuable because you've either wasted it or didn't plan for it properly until like things are kind of hitting you in the face, which is like I'm a good mixture of both. So I'm a believer that there's more time in the day than most people think,
Yeah.
and a lot of times people will like witness other people achieve several things and pursue all kinds of things and wonder like the first question that's always asked is how do you have time for that? But in reality, it's more like how do you manage your time for that?
Yeah.
Ooh,
Because
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So
honestly, that's my perspective.
no, that's a great perspective, and I think you hit on something that too often we all know, but we kind of glance over, right? And that's that time is a finite resource, so we only have 24 hours a day, every one of us. But then, how do you choose to allocate that time? It's kind of you know to throw an analogy out there, it's kind of like when you get your paycheck, right? Where do you allocate your money? Because that's what you typically care most about, right? Or have the obligations for. So whether that's your house, your car, your family, any other bills that you might have, time is very similar. you dedicate a certain portion of it every day to your work or to your family time, like you said, Shan, to your mental health. I mean, obviously there there has to be some kind of return for you on that time to make it worthwhile. I mean, obviously the three of us are giving up, an hour plus each week to do this, right? And I think obviously we see the value in it. So I guess my next like kind of follow up question that I'm thinking is, what do you guys do to ensure that the way, or at least where you invest your time, is worthwhile? And I
Mm.
know, Shan, you've got a couple different things that you're doing with your business. And Colby, I know you just kind of switched up some of your time commitments. So I think both of you have probably some great insight that you can add in here.
Um, hmm. Well, I did before getting to that, I did want to touch real quick on
Yeah.
something Shan mentioned earlier that really hits home to me, and I fall victim to this all the time, where I always feel in a rush. And it's good in some sense because it like makes me get done thing like makes me do things really quickly so that I have other time to do other things that I really really want to get to. But at the same time, it's just that constant, it's almost like a constant pressure to be quick with everything that you do, and sometimes that's not the best thing to do all the time. Sometimes it's better to take your time and slow down and kind of appreciate things as they're happening. So I definitely like, that's definitely like an interesting like point to just kind of point out there. It's just something that I think can happen when you're getting into a productive mindset, so to speak, is thinking that it needs to be jam packed 24/7, like action packed productivity all day, every day, go, 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 go. So yeah, it was just that little piece that kind of brought to mind. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like switching up, I guess, like what you prioritize your time to do, especially like off hours at work. I think for me, for a while, it's definitely been, I love to game in my free time. It's a big hobby of mine. It's something that like I love doing. It's relaxing to me, and it's also like it's engaging. So I just really like doing it. But obviously, as I've gotten older and like other things have popped up, like other opportunities, like this podcast or even some events that I know Josh has championed me for as well, to go out and speak at different things or be involved in the community in different ways. Um, I think I think the most important consideration that I had to make with that is, again, going back to the intentionality of things, is just evaluating what's important to me and why would I want to go do something. And I think I would never I never want to get in the habit of my life where I do things because I feel like I have to, or anything like that. Like I actually like want to think of them holistically and be like, this is either good for me, even if I don't like want to do it in the short term. Like I have a resistance to do it for any particular reason, but I know it's good for me long term, and I think that's just my biggest consideration, is because I always like view my life of like a total of like, it doesn't have to be pure happiness and pure joy 24/7, but I do want to, love my life and enjoy living it, to your point, Josh, about having a finite amount of time. And so just that whole piece of really being considerate of what gets introduced into your life, because I think a lot of things can just get pushed in by other people, not necessarily in a bad way, but it can happen. And I think it's important to make sure you're choosing to opt into something that you really want to do and you think is valuable.
Yeah, your
Solid.
answer made me think of two books that I've read over the years. One of them is Essentialism. And what that really talks about is focusing on the most important with the time that you do have. It recommends, basically having two pre qualifying questions. And if it doesn't align with those questions, and maybe you have more, you always need to personalize this advice, but if it doesn't align to those two questions, then it's an automatic no, and you shouldn't be putting your time in to it, because again, we only have finite amount of time. But the second book that I thought of when you were talking with your answer about having kind of that pressure on you is one called the 90-Day Year. And what that does is, it suggests instead of annualizing your goals, right, so that they're annual or yearly goals, to actually break them up into smaller segments. So a 90-day goal, because it keeps that that pressure to get it done. One of the examples they give in the book, if I recall correctly, is kind of like a New Year's resolution. Usually you're really gung-ho for the first month, maybe two, and it tapers off. But then you rationalize with yourself and you say, well, I've got 10 more months. I've got 9 more months. I've got 8 more months. And before you know it, you're making the same commitment again at the end of the next year. Whereas if you miss a week during a 90-day period, the pressure is a lot more intense. You don't have as much time to catch up. So you kind of drive it home a little bit more.
Yep. Yeah, it makes a lot of
That's
sense.
what I thought of. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. I mean, honestly, I might have to start doing that myself, because it is hard to like make life changes like that, and like have that sort of like 12-month period that you're thinking about and be like, oh, okay, I'm going to commit to this for 12 months. Like, that's really scary for a lot of people to make that sort of change in their life, knowing that like, oh, okay, I'm going to have to do this. Like, I'm committing to this for a full year, instead of like, oh, I'll commit to it for 3 months and that's my goal, and I'll reevaluate after the fact.
Yeah. And I know Shannon and I have been talking about that. And, Shannon, what are your thoughts around prioritizing your time? Because I know you and I have been having conversations about how we can prioritize our time individually. And I was just curious, what your thoughts are.
I think I've kind of like it mirrors your philosophy that you mentioned with those 2 books, and the way that operates for use of time. I like to like objectify like tasks, and I like to objectify like time as a whole. So like your 90-day plan, for instance, like if I'm going to set an annual goal and I set it broad, it's going to take me to the last 90 days anyway, I'm sure, like before I actually tackle it. Whereas if I like actually objectify something, break it down like beyond a subcategory, like let's say I'm working on my business, like I could easily say like, I want to focus on content for this month, but more than likely, like that's not going to give me good time management. That's not going to give me like a foreshadowing scope on like how to plan and how to like properly prepare. But if I say that I need to record 3 videos a week for the next month, then suddenly like, okay, that's immediately broken down. That's an hour a day, at least a couple hours a week for time and prep. And then I can start to, once like the tasks are being objectified and the time's being objectified, it's easier for me to get more realistic goals. And I just operate that way too. Like if something's broad for me for like an objective, I fail to manage my time for it. So I really got to like put myself in the mindset of like, here's exactly what I want to get done. And then the time management piece, luckily, usually like coincides.
Sounds like you're taking, kind of those high arching ideas and breaking them into kind of a SMART goal format. Are you guys familiar with a SMART goal?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for our listeners, in case you're not, it's just specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. So obviously timely is what we're talking about primarily right now, but those goals that you mentioned, you did make them more specific and more measurable. Obviously, was it really actually achievable, and is it going to help with that content creation, right? Is it relevant? So I think that's a fantastic way to break down those larger ideas, because I don't think those annual goals will go away with that 90-day target or your 5-year or 10-year goals. I think you're still working towards something most of the time. But it's really difficult also to manage your time for a year out when you don't know what kind of life things are going to come up, or, there's so much that can change in a 12-month period. It's difficult to really hold true to that, because there could be things that impact your ability to maintain those commitments, whereas you can shift them a little more regularly if you make those goals a little more, timeframes a little bit shorter.
Yeah. I did have a follow-up question for you then, Shan. So obviously, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Like, and you mean by objectifying, it's like breaking it down into like small actionable items that you can actually do, not some broader nebulous thing, right?
Right.
Okay. So when you're doing that, is it like, do you start with like, I have an idea, like a broader, achievement that I have in mind or a goal in mind, and then you break it down? Or do you usually have something specific that you start with and then it leads into, oh, I'll do this now, I'll do this now?
Oh, I'm actually going to steal from some of the coaching sessions that me and Josh have sat through, because that's one big part of it is like time management. But the way normally would be laid out is categorizing, like, again, like what's essential, what's goal oriented, what is maybe something that kind of you have like of high priority but not of the highest, and break it down like into buckets to where you can then like categorize each individual task on. So I mean, like the content creation part, for instance, like that might be part of my like digital marketing objectives, right? And that would be something that stays on my at least on my radar for that whole year of goals, when it comes to like time management, or at least like that quarter. You know what I mean? Like they might be they're hyper focused goals that kind of like I treat like buckets, and then it becomes easier to start categorizing like which objectives I want to tackle. And then of course like it allows you to get really vague, or not vague, really like narrow on what you're trying to tackle out. And then you can just plan your weeks, and generally that's how I do it. I plan my weeks based off of it. And if I'm ever like the best benefit to it that I recommend, most people who use this method, is anytime you're like, and this is kind of the opposite of what Josh mentioned, like sometimes you might lose time because something may happen. There's other times where you may gain time because you no longer had a commitment that you have to show up to. And that is the perfect opportunity to take, and for me, it's a chart, to kind of take a look at the chart, see, okay, what can I spend the next 2 hours doing that's both productive, but like not a chore, or not like something that I kind of just have to come out of the blue. Like, how can I prioritize my time that keeps in line? And maybe I'm not feeling like doing anything crazy, like productive, or anything like crazy extensive. I can choose from that my overall goals for the year, and find something that fits in one of those buckets. And that's kind of how I've been prioritizing my time, because a lot of times I'll literally like fill my schedule to the point where stir crazy. So that helps handling those situations.
All right. Second follow up then, because this is also for both you guys actually, because you guys both have a family. I'm engaged. I don't have kids. And you guys do a lot of stuff outside of work, way more than I do. And I've always been curious, because like right now, like when I'm off work, I'm like, okay, it's me time. Like I'm good. Like I don't have kids. I just have my fiance, whatever we do together, etc. And then I do have a lot of free time. And so I'm like, I was thinking like, oh yeah, like what can I do in my free time? Like what portion of my free time do I want to carve out for, my own learning, development, and growth? What time do I just want to be, just have fun, do whatever I want, etc. But for you guys, you obviously have so much more obligations. When you get off work, what is your mindset around what you're doing the rest of the day? Is it like a structured work day that you guys are doing things in exact order all the time? Or like, do you, when you get off work, you're thinking, okay, this is my window of me time, and then everything else is already planned out? Like, how does that work for you?
Well, that's what I mean when like a lot of times I say that most people don't realize how much time in the day there really is. So you'd be surprised how easy it is to kill 2-3 hours on the couch on your phone. So a lot of people who like don't have young kids, or like prior engagements or commitments, like don't think about that a lot. So like there's a lot of it that is kind of like on a repetitive basis, like doing homework with the kids, making dinner, cleaning up a little bit. All of that is like structured and pretty repetitive, but in reality, like when you break that down, like you're talking a couple hours of like actual like time allocation. And then if you're up as late as I am, really it's honestly a drop in the bucket.
Yeah. How much sleep you get, man? What the heck?
Not a lot. Usually like not in bed until at least 12 a.m.
Damn. Okay.
I'm going to bed earlier than that. Actually, a lot of the time, my wife and I are at least lying in bed by like 9:30. So we're pretty early birds when it comes to that. But I do agree with Shan. I think there's a certain amount of routine that's involved with it, right? I know I'm going to get up, I'm going to go into work, I'm going to come home, I'm either going to cook dinner, depending on what night it is, or help cook dinner, or my wife does a lot of the cooking too, but then there's homework to be helped with, or there's different aspects that take up, I'd say, those first couple hours. Did something break during the day, and now I need to fix that in the house. It's the joys of home ownership. There's definitely, usually we're probably getting around to when there's some actual free time. I'd say maybe 7 o'clock seems about right. And so then I've got a couple hours in there, but obviously I like to spend some of that time with my wife, and Shan is absolutely right that it's so easy to just kind of sit down and, especially in the generation of streaming and all of that, right? We can just binge watch shows or play games or whatever we want to do. And there's value in that investment for me in the relationship. I think, to answer your question about how I get things done, it's really just a matter of me following my desires, right? Like if I want to do something, I'm going to find the time for it. And that kind of goes back to what I was talking about with the paycheck analogy, is like, I only have a certain amount, and I'm going to decide what I want to do with it. If it's important enough to me, I won't go to bed at 9:30. I'll say good night and I'll stay up 3 hours. I mean, it's been a while, but I've pulled all-nighters, even in my 30s. I was pulling all-nighters, especially when I was in school. There's things that you just have to decide what is it worth to you, and what investment are you willing to make for it. And I think that drives a lot of my getting stuff done.
Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe I think it's honestly just like and I think I do this a lot, is overestimating, how much time it can take to get something done that's very productive. You don't need, a full work day's worth of time to be productive in your off hours.
Some people have trained themselves to only get 4 hours of sleep. So I always take that in consideration, just in case I actually do run out of time. Although I don't think it's a good idea. I'm totally not against those kind of wild practices, just because to Josh's point though, if you can build excitement around something, it won't take you that long anyway, because you'll put 100% of your focus into it. And something that might take 10 hours worth of time, broken up, might only take 3 hours, just focused on it.
Yeah.
So,
and I think that's key for, I think we already established I'm kind of the ambitious dreamer, right? So in my mind, the things I'm working on are leading towards some grandiose vision that I have. So it just keeps me engaged and encouraged, and pushing forward. So, but I think you're right. I think you've made a great point. Not everything takes nearly as long as you might think it would. And what I found have been super helpful, but sometimes it can be a detriment. So you have to be a little bit cautious with it. But a lot of times I don't spend much time thinking through how. I just dive in and I figure it out. Yeah.
No, that's smart. I mean, you definitely can overthink yourself to death on so many things.
When I think about that, the first thing that comes to mind specifically is programming. Because there's so many times where I'll see a new language, something that I had no familiarity in, or I haven't used before, and I'll immediately think how it must have taken a team of 10 developers and 3 all-nighters to at least get this up and going. And then I'll build some experience in that language, and build some excitement around it, and I learned quickly that something like that, that's probably the best example I could think of for any time someone thinks they overestimate time commitments. And I'm not saying programming takes no time, but it's one of those things that is just mostly unfamiliar to everyone who isn't familiar with it. And it would jump you to that conclusion that 400 lines of code took an entire year, when in reality it could take literally 3 days.
So I'm curious to flip that question on its other side to you, Colby, right? What are some of the roadblocks that, or are there roadblocks that you encounter for why you feel like maybe you're not being as productive, or, with your time? Because again, I don't think I put tons of time in. Other people around me tell me I do. So maybe I'm wrong on that, but, I I feel like I feel personally that there's lots of time in the day that I probably waste, right? But I'm curious what roadblocks you've encountered.
I think honestly, funnily enough, I think it stems back from school. Because I was never the type of kid growing up. I was never passionate about anything, and that advice growing up of follow your passion was always lost on me, and it was honestly probably more detrimental than it was helpful. Because I didn't have something where I was like, I have to do this, right? If I don't do it, I'm not going to be happy. It's like I could be happy doing a million different things for work or anything. And so when I started working out of school, I just got a pretty general job, like nothing that fancy. And, I think I was working for Ryder at the time, like managing a commercial rental truck branch down in the Sarasota area. And, that was fine. I was happy. I liked the people I worked with. It was good. I ended up then getting promoted and doing a sales job. Didn't like that so much, and I realized I should stay away from that side of things. But to go back, like during my personal time outside of work, at least initially outside of school, I didn't really have. It was hard for me to be motivated to develop myself professionally, I guess, in ways that would advance my career, because I didn't have a North Star at that point. I wasn't really committed to anything in particular. It's like I'm going to do everything I can to do, really well at my job at work, but then it stays there. And it's like I'm going to enjoy myself and just have a fun life outside of work. And that's it for now. And it wasn't really until I made the decision to change from my last job to like navigate into an IT job where, I studied and got my A+ and, got my first job and kind of made my own from there. And then it became, okay, well, I need to develop my skills in this area to push me forward, because I kind of felt behind the curve a little bit and I felt like I needed to play catch up. And so that kind of instigated the sort of professional development outside of work. And then I just became where I didn't like fall in love necessarily, but I realized that I was a lot more interested in the field than I thought I would be. And so I would just look up and do things in my off time here and there. And that's where it started, where it's just that initial, oh, I'm actually interested in looking these up. It's not, I don't feel like it's a chore. And that's probably the biggest thing for me. And I'm sure a lot of other people is that you want to be productive and you want to do things that will help you in your professional life, but it's hard after 8 hours at work to come home and do something that you don't want to do. And I think that's probably the hardest thing that I always encounter is just, and it's gotten better over time, is I've just learned what I like as a person. I learned that I've liked a lot of things that I didn't think I would like before. And I also learned personally that what's fun is doing something you're really good at, and it's fun to be good at things. And that kind of propels me towards learning and doing stuff is I like to get really good at something and excel at it. So when I initially get exposed to something, then it kind of snowballs and propels from there.
Yeah, that driving factor. Found that driving factor. Yeah, that makes sense.
That's why it's really interesting from my perspective with you guys is you guys genuinely seem to love the stuff that you do outside of work. Like it's either motivating, fulfilling in like a very powerful sense. Like I don't get the impression that you're like, oh, I got to go home and do this after work, right? Like, it doesn't give me that vibe at all. And that's why I was kind of curious with your mindset.
Yeah, you got to be careful with that too, like because I have seen people, and that's why like bag chasing can be dangerous too. Like if people develop either like business brands or hobbies or certain like money generating kind of like habits that aren't something that isn't aligned with like what someone likes to do. That can be really stressful, and it can turn into a chore pretty quickly. And I think we've all been through that. Mine used to specifically be school. Like I used to want to go in, I wanted to get my master's in computer science, and then like have a little bit of a focus in cybersecurity. But then I quickly realized like I would rather like literally like beg and plead my way up that ladder than literally like sit through school again and go through all of that. So, and I envy those people who can do that. Like, that's my same question to
See, that
go
was
through.
actually the piece that I could do. I did do that was
Yeah.
the part that I actually excelled in. Like, is I don't know. There's a part of my brain where it's like if I'm at school or even it's school and work. Actually, but like when I went to college, it was like it was a job to me, and I was like, I'm gonna do everything I can to like be super successful at it. Because I actually wasn't a good student in high school. I think a 3.0. It's like not that crazy, not that bad, but it's not.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to excel. And in college, I was like, okay, like this is a waste of money if I just sit here and don't do this. And so
Yeah.
I actually treated it like a job and found that, oh, okay, as long as like I'm committed to something and I want to do good at it, then I do a great job essentially. But I
Yeah.
have to be like committed into it.
Yeah, that's the other piece of it for me too. Is it also costs money. So on top of it being a drag, it also financially puts some pressure on you as well.
Yeah,
Oh,
you
yeah.
got skin in the game.
Mm-hmm.
So you said something, Colby, there that I think, and Shan, you reiterated it, right? Lining your productivity with, I guess, making it, pleasurable, or making it fun, or making it something you want, which I guess would kind of go back to the advice you got, Colby, of, follow your passion, but maybe you just hadn't found that passion yet. But I completely agree with you too, that, you know, doing things that you're good at, obviously it's a little easier. You succeed more often, so that success fuels kind of your belief and drives you into, more drive, more determination, and that helps you put out more effort, which is really cool.
That's important for time management too, honestly. Like
Yeah.
like don't fill your schedule up with things that literally are going to put you in a depressive mindset. Like you try to fill it with some kind of activity that motivates you and hypes you to keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that kind of, we talked about how we want to make sure that we use our time well to be productive, and that productivity is aligned with things that bring us pleasure and make us happy. So, what are your guys' thoughts around, allocating time towards, what most people might call like non-productive activities, right? So if I think about just sitting down and watching TV for an hour, or hopping on my phone and playing a game, like there's an element of that you could easily describe as unproductive, but does that ever also serve as a productive element, because it does allow you to recharge your batteries? Like, how do you guys balance that? Because you can't work 100% of every day, or you will burn out. So how do you balance the productivity with the pleasure?
You go first, Shannon, because I'm gonna have a soapbox with this one.
No, I literally like honestly for anyone wondering, like one, I just kind of I did a good job of winging it thus far, but this was kind of one of my main goals and ambitions through coaching, to try to like master, right? Because the way my mind works is once I have a clear objective, and once I'm like motivated to turn an idea into like an actual accomplishment, then I'm full force, right? But then when I get to the end of that, like I constantly deal with this, to where like I'll jump back on my phone and scroll for a couple hours a night, and just like watch TV or waste time and not want to be productive. And like for me, it's a never ending like battle, like back and forth through that. Luckily, I usually hold myself accountable to stay productive enough to where like I'm not spending all my free time just like browsing on my phone or whatever. And like in a day and age of like where short form content is as powerful it is right now, like everyone is kind of, I'm sure, susceptible from just sitting on their phone and scrolling for a few hours. But yeah, that was literally like one of my biggest goals for through coaching, is trying to like find ideas, or at least like get someone's like third party perspective on like what might drive me to build those like ambitious like goals and those ambitious challenges, to where like I'm more focused on that, and like how to replicate that almost like a formula. Because if you're like me, you know what drives you, but you don't have enough control to literally turn it on like a washing cycle. So
Yeah, you can't artificially just generate it all of a sudden. and be
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
But you can literally come up with a plan. And I think that's honestly like so much more than nothing. And a lot of people just aren't that way. A lot of people like have to be productive 24/7, and I envy those kind of people. But for me, like it's always that battle. And when I'm driven, like I'm really driven. And when I'm not driven, I'm really lazy. So it's a problem.
I'm a lot like that too. When I'm driven, I'm all the way in, and when I start to lose interest, it's a fast fade.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
All
am
right,
definitely
Colby, I
very
want to hear this
similar.
soapbox.
Yeah. Well, so this one, I am honestly going into passion. Like I'm very passionate about this because it's something I've really struggled with personally. Like I said, I'll never hide this fact. I'm a big gamer. I game a lot, and tons of people think that is a very big waste of your like personal time or time in general. And I can understand where that sentiment comes from because for a lot of people it is a giant waste of time, but it depends on a lot of external factors. So one, it depends on what your goals are in life and what's necessary to get done in your life. And is it taking away from you accomplishing those goals and getting done what you need to do? If you're doing everything that you need to do, you're ticking all the boxes of what you want to have in life, to be, this most successful version of yourself, there's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. Now, if it's eating up what you should be doing that on that time, then it is wasting your time because you have other goals that you should be working towards. So I think that's like the most thing that, or like that's the biggest thing that anyone should consider when they're thinking about that. Because I think it's easy to feel guilty about taking time for yourself and doing what you love. But as long as those two things are met, like I think you're good. Is just the short of it. But two, I also think there's a big difference between intentional use of free time to enjoy something very intensely versus mindless scrolling or spacing out with an activity. So I think television is potentially a big culprit of this. Not all, just some. Scrolling on social media sites is another big one that people can get sucked into. Even YouTube Shorts on your browser, it's like basically like TikTok, same thing. You can waste like quickly 20 minutes doing that. That's the stuff that I personally stay away from like the plague. I don't actually use any social media outside of LinkedIn, and I'm not super active on it anyways. I think I still have my Facebook profile, but I haven't used or posted on it in forever. So there's things that I just draw lines on because that's where I think it gets dangerous, is when it's escapism or kind of mindless use of time, which that can have its place to relax and take the edge off of whatever else intense that's going on. But yeah, that's kind of my opinion on all that.
Yeah, you
Yeah, I
definitely
think
need discipline, which we know you have, Colby, because like these are prime gaming hours and you haven't missed a podcast yet.
Exactly. I'm committed.
Yeah.
Yeah. We would call that in the business side of things opportunity cost, right? So what are
Yep.
you giving up to do the item that you want to do?
Yep.
And if it's nothing, then you're right. There's absolutely no harm in that. The only time it really becomes an issue is if you're trading off things that you really want um, to fill with that mindless time.
Yep.
Because I love some mindless time, believe it or not, right? That is, I do a lot of different things all at one time, and I'm really focused on like progress over perfection. So what winds up happening is at a certain point, a lot of those items start to end and wrap up altogether. And then I accomplished 6 or 8 different things kind of all at one time that have been sucking up a lot of my time, and I'm a little spent. So I usually have a month or so where it goes into like, okay, I'm not really using much of my time for anything productive except to, I guess, refuel for the next
Yep.
bout. Because after about a month, I start thinking of 6 new things I want to do, and that's how I wind up in that cycle again. So there is a place, I think you're right, for sometimes that mindless activity too, if that
Yeah.
works for you. And
100%.
I think that's key, right? Is to your point about the video game, there's no opportunity cost for you, or you're getting everything you want done anyway. So why not enjoy that portion of your time? Even though other people might look at it, they might not get the same fulfillment out of it. They might have to trade off on something else, and because of that, it's not worth it to them. So it is partially perspective, and that's why it's called time management and not like time rules, right? Like if there was one way to do it, we wouldn't even need to have these conversations.
Yeah, 100%. And I think too, what's really on show here is that people, like you're saying, people are very different, and you may not, especially like younger people. And then I felt like I learned this about myself as I learned what works best for me over time too, and what type of person that I am. Like I got out of high school thinking I was very much like a particular type of person, and then over time I realized I was definitely not that person. I think we all have very much preconceived notions about who we are, what we can achieve, what we want, etc. And then you pursue those things, you go through things, and you realize that, oh yeah, I don't want to do that. That is, I want to stay far away from that, or know this process of going through things doesn't work for me, etc. And it's important to pay attention to that. I think, especially like when you go through life, I think the biggest thing is just paying attention to how you feel and what's going on, and being mindful about things, because you'll learn a lot about yourself just going through mundane stuff, crazy stuff, everything.
Yeah. Basically like a stone in a river. Over time it smooths out because of all the things that I guess the current that flows over it. But, that's definitely how I've tried to tackle things through and learn from them as I go, get polished.
Wise analogy.
That's what we do here on Mastermind for the Masses. We drop analogies week after week. So if you haven't heard some of the other ones, you should go back to our previous episodes and really dive in. We've got some good ones.
Yeah, learn all about the recipes.
Exactly. All right, guys. Well, I think this has been an amazing conversation tonight around time management. We are getting probably close to the time for us to wrap up the podcast. So I'd love to open it up for final thoughts. Shan, you want to hit us with your final thoughts around making good use of your time and time management as a whole?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'll really reiterate on like giving your time purpose, because once you give your time purpose, it becomes a lot easier to manage. Whereas if you're kind of just telling yourself you need to be productive, that doesn't help really anyone. And it's hard to develop an actual schedule that makes sense to you and to the people around you whenever there's no purpose around it. So really that's what I keep on what I keep in my mind when it comes to time management, but I know for others it's different.
Speaking of others, Colby, what are your final thoughts on this topic?
I would just offer some advice for people that might have been or might be in the shoes that I was in when I was getting out of school and everything, is just don't feel compelled to do something that you don't want to do or are not interested in doing. You can't force that sort of productivity in your personal life just that easily. Like, you have to have something that really interests you or that you're engaged with and you want to do. If you don't want to do it, don't force yourself to do it. I mean, there are some things in life that you do need to force yourself to get done, maybe like going to the gym if you need to, work on your physical fitness, etc. But start small. Maybe too would be another piece of advice. Don't think you need to do it all at once. Start small, and you'll be amazed at how much builds over time if you're consistent with it. So yeah, just consistency over doing something maybe all at once.
No, for sure. And we've touched on a little bit of this today, but we talked about, ensuring that what you're using your time for aligns with what's important to you. Is it a priority to you? Is it something you're passionate about? Is it something that you're good at? And Shan just mentioned it a second ago, does it kind of fulfill that purpose? And if you're interested in hearing a little bit more about how those four go together, I actually do have an article over on my LinkedIn profile, going from success to significance. I wrote it a few years ago, but it talks about how those 4 P's really align, your priorities, your passion, your strength or your power. That would be the 3rd P. And then basically how that drives your purpose. And there's a 5th P that I've added since then that's not in that article, but it's the people around you. So, the power that comes from surrounding yourself with other productive, focused people or people that are focused on using their time well, that's really going to help you out in the long term, ensuring that you're surrounding yourself with people that have the similar mindset, have, similar objectives in life, and that they can help you, you can help them, and really have a collective effort towards achieving what you want. Well, this has been awesome, guys. I appreciate your time today, and we will see everyone next week for the next episode of Mastermind for the Masses.